Hi book lovers! I'm very excited for today's video because when this video comes out we are officially about to enter the release week of Taylor Swift's new album, The Tortured Poets Department. And what better way to celebrate that or to hype up even more anticipation than to also talk about poetry today. A quick disclaimer, I'm not like a huge poetry girl. I don't read all that much poetry. I do have some here that I would recommend, but I don't want you to think that I'm like a very good guide for poetry because I just haven't read that much, and I'm just a bit scared that someone out there will say, oh no, this is really bad poetry actually, and that I have no idea, because yeah, that might as well be very much true. But I find poetry also very individual to what you experience and what you connect with, and honestly, even if you don't like poetry at all, that is so okay. And maybe this is just a fun hangout between Swifties, I don't know, but I thought it would be fun to just reflect on some poetry that I read and also that I might want to read. And therefore please leave a comment for any recommendations that you guys have for poetry, because I feel like with this new album release I just kind of want to explore some more poetry maybe. But for now, let's talk about the poetry I have here for today's video. Okay, my first recommendation or my first poetry book I want to talk about is actually the one that really got me into poetry in the first place. I mean, I never really read poetry besides back in like high school when you kind of had to, and I never really considered it to be a modern thing. But then like 6 or 7 years ago, I came across Michael Faudet with Dirty Pretty Things, and when I prepared this video I even saw that I like had marks in here and like wrote notes and everything. I didn't even know that I did that back then, but I really enjoyed this one. And I'm scared to say that because again, when I looked up reviews, a lot of people also didn't enjoy that, and I get that this is not for everyone. So this is definitely a bit more erotic poems, if that is the right word. But to me, that was really cool. Like, you know, I like steamy romance, and I feel like this is a steamy poetry book, so of course this was something I would enjoy. But I do think that also the writing is so beautiful. My favorite poem is actually in here, and that's called The Mermaid. But this one is definitely one where I discovered poetry to be something that can be more modern, that I can relate to, or that I find really cool. And even if it's just a few lines or quotes, I don't know, I just really enjoyed this one, and I enjoyed it that much that I also got his other books. They are more out by him, but these are the ones that I have and that I also read. And I like these two, but my favorite is still Dirty Pretty Things. If you're like me and you never really liked poetry, but you like a steamy book, then you know what? Maybe these ones are for you. His girlfriend or wife, I'm not sure if they're married, but she's a poet as well. So I also wanted to try one of her books, and I got Sea of Strangers, and I did enjoy this one as well. It was a bit too sad for me, so I'm not like totally mad that I read this, but I also didn't think that this was anything revolutionary or like a 5-star read or anything. A poetry book that I actually really did like was Break Your Glass Slippers by Amanda Loveless. And this one was really cool because I don't know how you guys read poetry. If you read it from front to back in like one sitting, or you take your time and read it slowly, or skip through it and just read a poem here and there. I do all of the above, but this one was one where I read it from first to last page in like just a day or two. And the cool thing about this one is that it kind of is like a, not really a fairy tale retelling, but it encaptures like the Cinderella vibe, and you have like the narrator that talks to the godmother, and it's almost like a conversation but in like poems. And I thought this was really cool, and I enjoyed that so much. So I just also kind of like the storytelling aspect of this, and I like the whole Cinderella but she saves herself and doesn't need a prince vibe. I don't know, I think this was just a fun and cute thing, not like anything that was too crazy emotional, to me at least. This little series, because there are also other books in this format in the series, would be very good for like beginners. My next book that I read is very different from the ones that I just showed you, and I read that a few years ago, and I read it in German, but of course it has also the English version, which is The Terrible, and in German it would be Alles was passiert ist, which would translate directly into Everything That Happened. It's by Isra Delay Ward. I didn't know anything about her before that. It is more of like a memoir, but it's written in poetry style. It is like a poetry and a memoir in one. And I think this is just such a beautifully written story and also such an important message in here. Not everything in here is pretty, but the writing is. And I think if you want poetry but not in a traditional way, you want more of a story like the one that I just showed you, like this really is much more like a story because it is her life, like her memoir, but written in like a poetry way. And I have never read anything else like this, and I think this book is so worth your time. If you take one book from all of these, then it would be this one. My next book, a fellow student in my class has written, and I think that is so incredible and amazing, and that is The Butterfly Effect by her, Lina Matskis, and her friend Natalie von Appen. And for example, this is a poetry collection that I didn't read from front to back. I read like different poems here and there. It's about like being a young adult, about heartbreak, about love, about self-discovery and growth. I think it's just very, very cool that she did that, and she has her own book, so of course I wanted to mention this in here as well. And it's all written in English, so you know, you can all read it, and yeah, maybe check this one out. And since we have like a poetry discussion in general, and I don't consider this as like a guide to poetry or poetry recommendations, I also wanted to talk about more popular poetry books that I tried as well but didn't really connect with. And the first one is Rupi Kaur, and I have here The Sun and Her Flowers, and I think she's like one of the most popular poets. You've probably seen this book, I guess. I did like this, like I don't want to say that this was bad or anything, but I also think that it was a bit overhyped. Like I didn't really get why people loved it that much, and I think because I had that much more expectations and I felt a bit let down that my experience wasn't as great, because of course if your expectations are high, they're not matched, then you always feel a bit disappointed. It was just very mediocre to me, nothing bad, nothing incredible, just yeah, right there in the middle. And another one that I think is also quite popular is Atticus, and I have The Truth About Magic by him. One thing that I like about this book is that it is so beautiful because you have like different pictures in here, and the format and everything I think is really, really pretty. So oops, I did have a bookmark in there. You know, sometimes how people complain, oh, you buy a whole poetry book, but you don't really get a lot of words because, you know, it's poetry, and sometimes it's just like one sentence on a page and you're like, what did I even buy? This is how I felt about this book. This was nothing special to me. It kind of felt like just Pinterest quotes. I don't know, like it was just not for me, but I wanted to mention it in here as well because other people enjoyed this, and I'm not the best judge for poetry, so you maybe enjoy it. And as I said, this is still a very pretty book. You know, sometimes you don't really want to buy stuff like this for yourself, but maybe for someone else, you know, as a present, this might work for someone. And just because, you know, I don't like something doesn't mean that nobody else would enjoy it. And then the last one for today's video is actually one that I read a few poems in here, but not really a lot. And when I put this list together, I was like, oh, I never really read this book. And I thought, since we're like entering the Tortured Poets Department era, you know, maybe I'm gonna go back into poetry and read the one that I haven't read yet. And that is Falling Toward the Moon by Robert M. Drake and R.H. Sin. I hope that I'm saying that right. I think I bought this one probably because the cover is really, really beautiful, but I haven't really gotten to reading this. So I'm probably gonna read it around, you know, release date, just to get really into the Tortured Poems Department era. At least they all look beautiful, so there's always that. I think that poetry books in general usually are very, very pretty, and that already for me is a win, so I'm not mad that I own them. But I'm very interested what you guys think about poetry, if there's any poetry that you really enjoy. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And from Swiftie to hopefully another Swiftie, happy release week for the new album, of course. I'm so excited, guys. But other than that, give this video a like and subscribe for more bookish content, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!